Do your thing.
Okay, excellent. So we're back. Bud, if you don't mind, can we start at the beginning?
Sure.
Tell me where you were born,
Southgate, California,
which is
September 20, 1930. Southgate is part of Los Angeles.
And what were your parents doing there?
My father was a machinist for the Santa Fe Railroad, and my mother had owned first stores.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Huh. And you grew up in Southgate?
Yes, in that general area. I went to grammar school in Southgate, and then my mother opened a new store in Walnut Park, and so I went to junior high in Huntington Park, next community, and my mother started having health problems, so they closed up the first shop. She didn't do that anymore, and we returned to Southgate, where I went to high school and graduated there.
And did you learn about their professions as you were growing up?
Well, of course, all the first shops, we lived on the property. The one in Walnut Park was a huge old mansion, and so the lower floors was the first shop, and there was a great room and a kitchen area and so forth on the first floor, and then the second floor was the sleeping areas. And so I knew about the fur business, of course, because it was there all the time.
Huh.
And then I knew my father worked for the railroad. A side story on that. Back in the 1930s, people didn't ordinarily own cars. The average workman in the United States walked to work or took a streetcar.
Mm-hmm.
That's how we got around. And so consequently, the people lived closer to work in those days in most cases. So anyhow, we had a car. But on days that my mother needed the car or was using the car, we would go pick up my father. So we would drive on the railroad property, and there was a huge building there that was a machine shop and a blacksmith shop and the welding shop. And my father had been hired in 1923 because he could weld, electric weld, which was extremely new then. He had learned to electric weld at the Rock Island Arsenal in World War I. So that's why they wanted him there. And so he was a welder. My mother would pull in the parking lot and say, "Go in and tell your daddy we're here." So I'd go in and I'd tell my dad, "We're here," you know. So I started. And then when I first went to work for the railroad, that's where I worked, to Santa Fe.
The same shop that he was...
Well, the roundhouse area, yeah. By then my dad was foreman.
Ah.
And so, but he was working a split shift. He was relieving the other foremans. And as a consequence of that, I went to work as an apprentice. Well, back step on that story. I had completed 2 years of college at Compton Junior College, and there was no work. This was 1956 or 7, and we were in a little slump like we are now, and there was no work. And I found work in a cabinet shop, and then one night at the dinner table, my dad said, "Would you like to go to work as an apprentice? We have an opening down at the shop." in those days, this is an interesting point. In those days, in the union rule book, it said that relatives of employees would be given first opportunity at any vacancy. And of course, that way they got people that they knew a little bit about, background and so forth. So I said, yeah. And I think it paid 50 cents an hour when I first went to work. And so I took an apprenticeship and at the Santa Fe Roundhouse in Los Angeles, working on steam engines.
And so did you have any skills to get that job, or you mostly got it?
Very mechanical from the get-go.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I had got A's in all the shop classes I ever took. And I built things that nobody else built. I built a kayak in junior high.
Wow.
And
Out of what?
it was a wood frame,
Uh-huh.
and it was covered with canvas.
We're big kayakers, so.
Oh, are you?
Yeah, I love to kayak.
Oh my God. Well, this was, I'm trying to think, I think it was a two-placer, I don't remember. But I built this kayak. What in the hell for, I don't know, I just wanted to. So anyhow, I built a surfboard in junior high. I built a toboggan. We heated the stuff and bent it and all that stuff. So I forget what I did in metal shop, but I had good grades all along. But I was always mechanical.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I took to it. I went, there on the steam engines and everything. I just thought it was fine. And so then I went to,
So you went to 2 years of junior college,
yes,
and then you got the apprenticeship.
yes. And then,
So that means that you had, tell me what you had heard about the union and the railroad before you got there.
nothing,
Nothing. From your dad?
nothing. I'll tell you about that too.
Okay.
Okay, so I went to work at the shop in Los Angeles in 1950. I think it was August 1950. And I'm living at home. So the first paycheck I got, my father said, I want you to go over and see Pete Smith, give him $5 and join the union. And I said, why? He says, because it's a good thing to do and it keeps people off your back. Okay? So dutifully, I was a young kid, I was 20 actually then. I went over and looked up Pete Smith and I said, I want to join the union. And he said, okay, it's $5, da-da-da-da-da-da. And so I became a union member. It wasn't till many years later that I got to doing the math. The strike on the railroad started in 1922. The railroad industry busted the shopcraft unions. And the railroad immediately started hiring strike breakers. And my dad came to Los Angeles from Iowa, where he worked for the M and St. L, was a railroad. And he came to Los Angeles in 1923. And to this day, I'm not too sure he may have been a strikebreaker.
He never told you that?
Never spoke of
Ooh.
the union or anything. Never.
Huh.
In his whole life, he never spoke to me. And I became a union rep in the shops. He never said anything. I became a union representative, general chairman on the whole system.
Mm-hmm.
Never discussed union at all.
But he told you to join when you
He
started.
was the one that told me to join.
So interesting.
They,
Huh.
they keep them off of your back.
Hey. So interesting.
Now get
Now, sit
away.
down.
Get away. Go on. Hurry up. So I suspect.
Makes sense. Go.
And my mother died first, so I couldn't ask her. My sister's still alive. I could ask her. She might remember. I don't know. But my sister's 90, and so her memory's not good either. But anyhow, he may have been a strikebreaker. But he never discussed unions with me, ever, on any level.
Huh.
Never said a thing. So, I
But
don't know.
was happy you were in the shop? I mean,
Well, I've missed part of the story too. My dad was relieving the other shift's foremen. He had been a foreman, since about the beginning of World War II. And he was what we called a steam head. He worked on steam locomotives.
okay.
Then diesel came in, and almost all the steam foremen were set back to mechanics.
Yeah, really?
Yeah. But my dad, they kept on. And as a foreman. And so he was relieving the other shifts. So it meant that 10 days a month I worked under him. Or my journeyman did.
Mm-hmm.
And I worked for my journeyman.
Right.
And I guess they were worried about favoritism or something. But of course, he saw to it that I got the toughest of the assignments, as not being favored. But in the union book, the new union, there was a company union before, and we can go into that if you like. Anyhow, in the union book, you couldn't work for a relative.
So you get points toward being increasing your chances to get the job, but you couldn't actually work for the
For your relative.
relative. Both of those things make sense.
Okay. So they come to me and said, "You can't be a machinist." And at the dinner table that night, my dad said, "Okay, here's the story. There's a thing in the book, and you can't be da-da-da." And
How long had you been there?
just a couple of months. Hadn't been long.
Okay.
Somebody complained.
Right.
So somebody just wanting to make trouble, it had no effect on anything, He said, "We can change your apprenticeship over to electrician, or you can go to San Bernardino as a machinist." Well, I'd been living at home for 20 years, and I was going with Virginia. And,
You had already met Virginia.
huh?
You had already met.
Oh, yeah, we'd been going together 3 years. We started going together 17.
Oh my goodness.
And married
impressive.
20. We've been married 61 years. So anyway, I kind of like the idea of moving away from home. So I went over that night and proposed to Virginia, and at first she said no. And I said, "Okay." And she said, "Well, you come back, on the weekends and everything." And I said, "No, I'm not going to do that. I'll just move out there." And I'd had a girlfriend out in San Bernardino that she was aware of. And so she changed her mind and decided maybe she wanted to get married after all. Her excuse was she had to get her teeth fixed.
Before she got married?
Yeah. Pretty lame. Anyway, so we were married in December 8th, 1950. And I was already working in San Bernardino by then. I'd been there 2 weeks. And So then about 4 months later, I got drafted into the service, and I did my 2 years in the military. Was a military policeman at an atomic test series out in Nevada, where they dropped the bomb and we walked through ground zero an hour later.
Did you have any sense at the time about the...
Nobody did, including the scientists. They walked with us. And then I was went to Korea for a year with a artillery unit and come back unscratched. This was during the hot war.
Mm-hmm.
We lost 58,000 killed in 3 years. And so anyhow, I come back from that, continued my apprenticeship.
So Virginia stayed in San Bernardino while you were...
No, she went back to Linwood area where she was from. That's right next to Southgate.
Yeah.
And she stayed with her parents part of the time and my parents part of the time for the time I was in the service. So then my parents had owned vacation property in a community called Crestline. And Crestline is adjacent to Lake Arrowhead.
I love Lake Arrowhead.
Yeah. Okay, so they'd had property up there, and I wrote Virginia and I said, see if you can find some place to buy in Crestline. And she and both parents went up there, and they found a place and put a down on it. She was working at a savings and loan then. The real estate agent owned the property, and evidently he got a better offer, and he never put in, and he had some of their money. So she went to her loan officer in the savings and loan and said, I don't know what's going on. And he said, let me see. So he made a call to this guy's bank, and the bank said, he's behind, I don't know how much money to the bank. We accept the offer on your terms. And they did. And I think we had a payment like $50 a month or something.
That's great.
So anyhow, I come back from the service, went back to work, and after a while Virginia didn't like Crestline. And
So that was where your parents had a vacation home, but you all lived there while
Yeah.
you worked?
yeah,
Okay.
Santa Fe. I drove up and down the hill. It was 15 miles. The people at the shop thought I was crazy.
To go that far.
And I said, it's quicker than when I lived in Los Angeles and drove 15 miles to work. So it's nothing to me.
Right.
Anyway,
Huh.
we moved down the hill and so then I became a assistant local chairman.
Well, wait, I want to backtrack a little bit.
Sure.
You get the job, you're only there a few months, you go off to the service.
Yeah.
You come back, you get a similar job still waiting for you?
My job is waiting for
Your
me.
exact job is waiting for you.
Yes.
And your interaction with the union after you gave the guy the $5, what happened after that?
Nothing.
Zip.
Nothing. I paid my dues every month.
And was there something going on that you just didn't participate in, or you just not much
I just didn't.
presence?
I just didn't know anything about it and didn't care.
And nobody asked you? Nobody said, come?
Oh, they said, oh, you got to come to the meetings, but I didn't go.
Okay.
You know.
Yeah.
So I get to San Bernardino, and some of the committee come to me and said, we think you'd be a good local chairman, but there's assistant local chairman opening. We'd like you to run for it. So
And they ask you that without having ever been to a meeting?
right. So I said, okay. And so I ran for it, I got it, never been to a meeting. So anyway, then they had a big meeting. The guys were all riled up about negotiations. And you know, I don't know if you have it in any of your stuff, but the negotiations on the railroad is quite a to-do. And in 1926, they passed the Railway Labor Act,
Mm-hmm.
and wherein you basically can't strike. And so the guys were all riled up about that. And I told two of the big talkers, you know, look, you get the guys all together, we'll get the vice president of the union out from Chicago. So I'll be damned if these two guys didn't rile up the troops. And we wrote or demanded, actually, which was stupid, we demanded that the vice president of transportation come out and explain to us what the hell is wrong. And so that night there was, I don't know, 100 plus at the meeting. It was pretty well attended. And they sent out the Grand Lodge representative from the railroad. Can't think of his name now. Anyhow, he came out, and everybody got up and said stupid things, you know. And I had, when I was living in Crestline, I had been encouraged to join the Toastmasters group up there. And there was no television in those days up in the mountains.
Mm.
So there wasn't a lot to do, so I joined, and I got to where I could speak comfortably. You know, your knees weren't knocking and you're shaking and so forth. And I could speak comfortably. So I got up and made a pitch. And all these other guys were saying terrible things. And I said, you know, we're trying to understand what's going on here. And so this guy explained the Railway Labor Act and how we're restricted and da-da-da-da-da. So anyhow, later on, the financial secretary come to me and he said, so-and-so asked who you were and said, we need more like him. And there...
Okay, we're back. Sorry about that.
Just put a fresh tape in there and forget it.
Sorry about that technical difficulty.
Okay, you know.
There's no tape. It's it's all digital.
Oh my.
So you gotta be sure the memory is
Oh dear.
doing the right thing. That's why I'm
How
using
long-
my glasses and my headphones.
How long does that record?
It should record about 4 hours.
Really?
And I thought it was empty. But apparently what was supposed to have been taken off wasn't. But now we're back on.
Okay,
so
we're back
we can
on
go
and
back.
we're talking about my first election.
Yes.
So they asked me, my local committee said, you should run. And again, I didn't know anything about anybody. I hadn't been to any of the conventions or anything. So I said, okay, I'll run. So then I put out the word that I'm running.
Mm-hmm.
And you notify all the locals that you're a candidate and ask for their support. You needed 3 locals to nominate you to be put on the ballot. And so I didn't know anybody. I keep emphasizing that. So I went to, of course, my home local nominated me. I went to Barstow,
Mm-hmm.
and I got them to nominate me. Then I went to Los Angeles, which is a little bitty local, and it has it's very late in the month, so the information comes in later. And I got their nomination. I had the 3. And I was playing possum, basically, is what I was doing. And in the meantime, the man that was supposed to retire come out, he wasn't going to retire. He's running. And this was all a political intrigue thing that I'll tell you about. So, well, I'll tell you now, the assistant general chairman is going to retire. Bill Irwin was the directing general chairman. And he had a very good buddy named Dub Dahoney who had supported Bill and been with him and so forth and so on in Cleburne, Texas. I found out many years later that they figured to have the incumbent run again. And in those days, you only had a 1-year term. So he would run again, and then at the appropriate time, he would resign, and Bill Irwin would appoint Dub Dahoney to the job. And here I come ruining everything.
Ruining the scheme.
So the directing general chairman, he put out flyers and stuff opposing me. And derogatory remarks about the son of a foreman, etc., you know. Well, I was working at this liquor store, second job. And I had this figured out from the get-go. And what I did, I took every machinist in San Bernardino and I contacted him personally and asked for his vote. Every one.
Wow. How many people was that, more or
I
less?
think it was 500 and some.
Wow.
Every one of them, and I talked to and asked for their vote.
How'd you get their phone numbers?
Well, I'm with the union.
Okay.
But I talked to them in the shop.
Yeah.
Everyone I could talk to personally.
Right.
Talk to in the shop. So then, okay, you got the promise of everybody, right? But how many are going to make good on it come election day? So what I did, I carpooled everybody, and I would put 5 guys in the carpool, 1 driver and 4 riders. That meant that the driver had to be there because he agreed to haul these people to the vote. And the voters had to be there because the driver was waiting for them. And everybody showed up.
That's amazing. Good
Everybody-
strategy. Huh.
Everybody showed up, including the incumbent. He showed up to watch the election. And these guys were lined up out in the street. And they all had this little slip of paper with them. Your driver is. And the other ones, the people. I made all this out while I was sitting in the liquor store. A little tab said, your riders are.
Right.
And so he would know who he, so forth. And then the day of the election, I went through and talked to everybody I could again to remind them. The vote came in, and I had studied the prior elections. What's the average vote? System-wide, how many votes, and so forth. And I got more votes in my local than was average election, all the other locals. And there's 3 guys that voted against me, and I'm still looking for them.
Oh.
I don't know who in the hell they were. I got all but 3 votes.
That's
Okay.
not a bad record.
Then
That's a good strategy. Turnout is everything, huh?
Then I went up to Barstow for their meeting. And here's the incumbent again. And you're not allowed to campaign within 100 feet or something, you know. But he was there. Well, anyway, I got 95% of the Barstow vote. So I had more votes in my home local than normal. Now I had another 40% more votes than that. Cleburne came in, I got half of their votes. I got half of the votes from Argentine, where the incumbent was from. I got 50% of the votes in almost all the locals that I'd never been to, never heard of, or nothing. They're just voting against whatever. So it turned out, when the election count was in, it turned out that I beat the incumbent 5-1. And I was too young and too dumb to realize it at the time. But that was some accomplishment. And it went through the damn union big time.
People noticed.
Yeah. 5-1. Out of nowhere. Nobody knew me.
Right. Huh.
So anyhow, that was my first election. Well, then Bill Irwin, of course, he's a politician. He's going to try to get along and so forth. So now I got the next election's coming. And here's the guy that supported the loser, so forth and so on. And the first thing he said to me, "What is the first duty of a general chairman?" I said, "Represent the membership." He said, "No, it's to get reelected. That's your first duty." So comes the...
Such a common approach.
Yeah. So it's coming along, and going to have another convention. And he said, "You got anything for the bylaws?" And I said, "Yeah, I got several." He said, "Well, write them up and send them to me, and we'll include them in propositions for change." And the one thing that was always hampering the district was money.
Mm-hmm.
And the first time Bill Irwin visited San Bernardino after I'd won the election, we're driving over to a restaurant to have a bite to eat after the meeting, and he said, "I wondered, mumble, I wondered if you could support a nickel a month increase in the per capita tax." And I said, "Absolutely not." And he said, "Why not?" And he said, "I wouldn't fuss with it for less than a quarter." So, okay, right then we're going to be friends, you know. So I had 5 propositions I wanted to put forward. One was that the term of office was 4 years instead of 1, because you were always in the midst of a campaign. It cost the district money, I laid out all the excuses, and I put that one in. I put in, and this one I can't remember the word, just right, and it's important. But I put in, "There shall be no more per capita increases." That was the lead line. Except for each nickel raise per month, for each nickel raise per hour, per capita will raise 1 nickel a month. So you get a nickel an hour raise, it's a nickel a month, big deal.
Yeah.
Put that one in. Terms, I had, another one was, they were starving on the road. They got $15 a day per diem.
This is the union.
that's the support
Reps
the
who
rep
traveling
out
around.
the travel.
Yeah.
$15 a day for meals and room and everything was ridiculous. And they were staying in $3 and $4 hotels. I mean, ratty stuff in Chicago. So I put it, the per capita would be $15 per day plus receipted expenses, which meant your hotel and your cabs and stuff like that was received. I forgot what the rest of them were. Anyhow, Bill called and he said, "You're never going to get all those to pass." And I said, "I know it, but give them something to throw away, and we'll go out and sell it. Try to sell it."
How'd you come up with them all? Was it because you were talking to people?
No, it was out of my
Or
head.
you were just
It's stuff that was-
observing?
Well, it was annoying me, $15 a day, and staying in ratty places. I didn't like that. It was my theory that I should not have to stay anywhere less than my own home. And preferably better if it was available, But we didn't go crazy and start staying at the 5-star hotel. But anyway,
So as soon as you got elected, you stopped working as a machinist and
yes,
started
when you're
traveling around.
elected, then you go on full time.
Got it.
And I still carried seniority in the shop in San Bernardino. And I had 41 years seniority when I retired. And so all the time I was a union rep, I still
You were
had
still
seniority.
collecting accruing the seniority.
Yeah. So anyway, we go out and visit all the local lodges and explain and answer their questions. And of course, these are the people that vote, the one that comes to the meetings, All 5 of them passed with flying colors. I attended one of the last things I did as a union rep, and I was then operating the guide dog school, was I attended a District 19 convention in St. Louis, and that's got to be 20 years ago, because I've been retired 20 years. But all the other railroad districts have been merged into District 19.
Huh.
District 19 is the surviving district. There is only one railroad district now. And guess why? It's the only one that had any money. The rest of them all went broke. And I asked for the rule book, and it's still there the way I wrote it.
The 5 cents a month for
And
5 cents an hour,
Yep.
which is a very effective.
And they got $5 million in reserve.
That's astonishing.
Yeah.
Huh.
And so that's the reason that they're all together, is because they had a financial base
Right.
to work out of.
to
And that's
build
what
on.
gave them the base.
Huh. That's fantastic. And that was your first convention
Yeah,
and your first
yeah.
set of
Well,
resolutions.
my first convention was when I was sworn in. This was the second convention, actually, that I attended, was the one that these things had passed.
Got
They
it.
passed in a vote.
Mhm.
So anyway, I did that, and I went on, and I was a general chairman. And Bill Wimpenzinger, the international president, retired, was our vice president of the railroads, retired, and Bill Wimpenzinger was the new vice president of transportation. He come out of the auto industry, and he and I hit it off right away. I don't know why, we just did. And later on, he come to my house in San Bernardino with Joe Manners, who was our lead attorney. and asked me, Bill had just been elected international president, and he asked me to come and be on his staff. And I don't like Washington, D.C. I think it's a cesspool. The politicians and all the political manure that goes on there, and everybody's screwing the wrong person, and so forth and so on. I just didn't like Washington, and I passed. And I thought, well, that takes care of any promotion, you know.
Now, how far into your career was that? What I want to clear the timing.
Oh, Jesus.
More or less.
About halfway.
Yeah.
So I passed and felt that I burned my bridges, and that would be the end of that. So somewhere along in here, I had been nominated and elected to the board of directors of International Guiding Eyes, and that was a school that provided guide dogs for the blind. Machinist Union members had started it, supported it, and so forth.
Had started the school.
Yeah, the Machinist Union members at Lockheed started the school in 1948. When one of the Machinist Union member was denied a guide dog because he was too old. And
Really?
He was 56. So they started a guide dog school on the basis of that. And they had started out training a dog at a time or two, you know. It had all the early teething problems. Well, then I became a member of the board. And
No, wait, how did you get involved? You couldn't have become a member of the board. Were you involved before you got on the board?
No,
Not at all.
no.
Just because you were a rep,
Just
a
because
union
I was
officer, and they put you on the board.
Somebody on the board
Okay.
recommended me.
Okay.
Jack,
You seem to be drafted everywhere you go.
well, it kind of was. Jack, I can't think of Jack's name, but anyhow, I was on the board. And the guide dog school decided to build a new facility. And the guy heading up the board, and this is not for publication, the guy heading up the board was a goddamn crook.
Mm.
And the construction job got in deep trouble. They ran out of money and everything else. It was terrible.
Where were they building it?
In Sylmar, California. And the Grand Lodge loaned them, I don't know, tons of money to finish up. Then the guy that was stealing, and I had proof of it, retired. And so was due to retire. In the Machinist Union, you have to retire at 65. And he was going to retire. And Wimpy wanted me to take the job, become a Grand Lodge representative, and run the guide dog school. That was my sole assignment.
And you wouldn't have any other
Assignments.
assignment other than the guide dog. Oh, that's interesting.
Right. Well, that was part of the Machinist Union contribution to the school. So goes through that, and I become director of the guide dog school. When I took over, they had $700 cash in the bank, and the operating cost was $70,000 a month.
This is for the new facility that had been so
this
over.
new facility was
cost.
now operating. They had a fundraiser, Moskowitz, I can't think of his first name now. And he was good. I talked to him several times about how he was doing it and so forth and so on. And he died of a heart attack on the road for the guide school.
Oy.
It was in Phoenix. And the people tried to throw dinner parties or fundraisers, and they fell on their ass each and every time.
You got to know what you're doing.
No, you don't steal off of the top. And they were stealing.
So it wasn't just the one guy.
No, he had Confederates. They threw a dinner in Hawaii. The president of the guide dog school, the secretary, the president, his wife, the secretary and her husband, and the financial secretary and his wife went to Hawaii for 7 days for a 1-day dinner. And they charged every bit of it against the school. 6 people.
That's so sad.
Went to all
Isn't
the
it?
outer islands and all this other shit. And I had all those receipts. After I'd taken over the job, they come to me with a big bag of receipts and said, "What do you want to do with this?" I said, "Set it down there and I'll go through them and see what we got." And that's what it was all about. At Christmas time, they went to Trader Joe's and bought $500 of liquor and signed it off against the dinner in Hawaii, which had failed 6 months before. Well, now, what do you do with some information like that? I could have some people put in jail, but what kind of publicity is that for your charity? You'd never be able to raise nothing.
Yeah, that's true.
So, just let it go and ease the people out. And
You
so
couldn't
when
threaten them and tell them they had to give you some money back?
No, I
No.
didn't even tell them I knew.
Really?
I told Duke Lee I knew one time, and he said, "Who told you that?" And I said, geez, I can't say his name, first name, Moskowitz. And he said, "He talks too much." But he knew that I knew, and that kept him off of my back. So anyway, I'm sure his Confederates knew I knew too by then, you know.
Right.
And they had bingo games, and they were stealing from every bingo game. They took a skim. Anyhow, so
So were you put into that job in order to clean up the place? Yeah. That's not a very easy task.
Wimpy said he never knew anybody as goddamn honest as I was. It was ridiculous, you know. And he told Virginia, says, you know, Bud gets up in the middle of the night, 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and just sits there and stares at the wall, thinking things out. And he said, "Boy, I used to use a lot of sleep, but now I don't. I'm sleeping swell, you know." So anyhow, when I retired, we had $1 million in reserve. So we got it done. Took 10 years, but we got it done. My first fundraiser, I asked Wimpy if he would stand for a dinner.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, where do you want to hold? When's your birthday, Wimp? And it was in November sometime. Where do you want to hold it? And I said, how about Las Vegas? Everybody likes to go to Las Vegas, you know. And the people coming will be union reps or something. The first dinner we threw was at Caesar's Palace. And we actually encouraged people not to come to the dinner.
You wanted him to buy the tables and then stay home and save
No,
some...
buy an equivalent in the journal.
Ah, yes. Journals are always the best.
Well, the thing is, if I had a table, we had to pay for the food.
Right?
And that was the idea, was not to pay for the food. So anyhow, that first dinner, I think we made $100,000. And the guys before was losing money on he tried 3 times and lost tons of money. And so mine was a success. You know.
Huh.
So anyway.
So that you made 100,000, and almost everybody who came and who bought ads was machinist, or
Yes.
it was a broader audience.
All
than
machinists.
that? All machinists.
And another thing I
That's
did.
impressive.
Another thing I did too was I put all the vice presidents against each other. Who could raise the most money? And some went out there and killed to be first, you know.
Yeah.
Well, anyhow, the first dinner we made $100,000. And I thought I was in hog heaven, you know. But anyhow, that dinner has continued to this day. We're on the 32nd or 3rd. And the last 2 dinners that I attended, they had 1,000 people at the dinner. And this has been for several years, so it's sustaining. It's not just one fluke.
Right.
And for the last 3 years,
That's
they
impressive.
have raised $1 million at dinner time.
No kidding.
And the people get up and give the checks over at the dinner. So that dinner's still doing. It's still going. But I think I've attended my last one. To go drive out there for a lousy dinner, you know, shit.
It's a long ways.
Anyhow,
And is the facility?
that's the story
That's
of the
so
guide dog
interesting.
school.
I think we should take a break because it's almost lunchtime, right?
Yes, it is.
Let me. Okay, so we're back after lunch, and Virginia's going to sit in for a little bit. And hey, dogs are going to go sit down. Dogs,
Huss,
Hope.
go lay down.
go lie down.
Go on.
He's kissing her. She smells
that.
like puppy.
Yep, I have a puppy. So, I want to go back to when you first ran for the position that made you a full-time union
Right.
rep and left the job as a machinist.
Okay.
You knew it was going to involve travel and
Yeah.
maybe different hours.
Yes.
Was it a hard decision? Was it any
No,
decision? Was it
Virginia
obvious?
Virginia and I talked about it. I was going to have to be gone. Probably at that time, and it turned out to be that way, about 2 weeks a month.
It's a lot for the
Yes.
potential
But-
family.
But
And
there was a plus side of that too, because when I was at home, I was home all day. That's where my office was, and I could run and pick up the kids, or we could do this or that or whatever.
you had your home in your house.
Yes.
I had
Your
my
office
in
in
my
your house. Right.
So I would be home to greet the children and so forth and so on. And I worried about the children being without their dad for 2 weeks at a time, but the 2 older ones, they were old enough, they adjusted well, and
Yeah.
Matt didn't seem to have any trouble with
No.
it. And
He called home, and then they talked to him.
I was not a normal traveling man. I hated every minute I was away from home. A friend of mine at that time, another general chairman, told Jen I got homesick halfway up Cajon Pass, and I got on at San Bernardino on a train. And I was homesick before I was up here. It was a job that I had to do, and traveling was part of it, and that was that. A lot of guys enjoyed the traveling.
Right.
And I did maybe the first year, saw new things, new places and so forth.
And
but-
I traveled with him as much as I could because of the kids, but my mom would come over and stay with the kids
So that you could go.
so that
So
I
she
could
could travel.
But she would not babysit so I could work. She absolutely would not do that
So anyway,
because she wanted to be a grandmother and didn't want to be one that, had to put the
so anyhow, I
screws to the
traveled.
kids all the time.
I traveled, and I called home almost every night, and I'd talk to Matt. You know, how you doing, buddy? Da 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 da. You know. So, yeah, we just made the adjustments that was necessary. Now,
And how far did you travel? How your territory was?
my territory, that's an interesting point. I felt that, you know, well, I won the job. I lived in California. I would probably take care of the territory from Albuquerque this way.
Right.
The directing general chairman that opposed my election lived in Albuquerque, and he could take the eastern part just as well.
Right.
But when I come up with the idea, he said, "Oh no, you ran against whatever his name was, and that was his territory. You take his territory," which was from Albuquerque to Chicago.
That's why you mentioned Chicago.
And
Yeah.
then between Newton, Kansas, and Galveston, Texas, all the points in between.
Mm-hmm.
And in Cleburne, Texas, there was a very large shop, almost the size of the one in San Bernardino. Kansas City had a large shop. Topeka had a large shop that manufactured boxcars. That was all the larger shops. Argentine, Kansas City had a big shop.
And so you would fly to these
No,
places?
see, at
Go
first
on the
I
train.
You rode the trains.
rode the trains because it was free.
Yeah.
I still got a pass in my pocket. I can ride the trains
No kidding.
today. The Amtrak.
Right.
Anywhere Amtrak goes on Santa Fe rails, I can go. But then after, I don't know, I'd been on the job 5 or 6 years maybe, somewhere around in there. The time that it took to travel by rail got to be too much. You couldn't do that anymore, so then we flew. See, it used to take 3 days to get to Chicago from San Bernardino.
Right.
And in those days, you could make it in 3.5 hours by plane. They've cut the speed of the planes way back now. It takes longer. But anyhow, yeah, the rule of thumb over was 3 days opposed to 3 hours. So then I started
Huge
flying.
difference.
So then we flew all the time.
Bud, go take that away from him.
Oh. Pain in the ass.
It's
So
noisy.
much noise.
And it's
Hey.
probably not that good
No
for
more.
you either.
No
No.
mas.
Really not. Healthy. Did you have any doubts about the choice to take the traveling job?
No.
No? It made sense.
That's the reason we were married so long. I was gone half the time.
Must have helped, yeah.
It was.
Oh, there's a side story here though that's really kind of funny.
Will you stop it?
When
Go
I
lay
start
down.
flying, and I would get up in the morning in Chicago. The Santa Fe's headquarter building was in Chicago, so we went there for all the final conferences on our cases that we were handling. And I'd go into meetings in Chicago. You have to get up at about 6:30 maybe Chicago time. Get to go into meetings, and we used to cut off the conferences at 12 o'clock, and then I'd go check out of the hotel and get the bus to the airfield. And they had a plane that Continental called the Skyway Highway, and you get on that at I think it was 6 o'clock Chicago time, which would be 3:30, 4 o'clock maybe California time. And they had a cart that came through, and they made sandwiches for you,
Huh.
fresh bread and
Really?
and they'd had all kinds of cuts, roast and turkey and so forth.
Lay down.
And then make sandwiches for you.
Lay down.
Anyhow, so you get through with your conferences, you'd run for the airport, you'd get on the plane, you'd fly home, get off the plane, and Virginia'd be there to meet me, get in the car, and start home from the Ontario airport. And I heard every problem, grievance, complaint, anything had happened in the 30 minutes it took to get home. I mean, I got unloaded on. And while you were out there having a good time, I had to good time.
With everything.
She was always bitching at me about out there having a good time. So I took her on a trip one time, and then she didn't do that anymore. Because there's some places in Texas where I'd have to get up at 2 o'clock in the morning and make the train. A little bitty place, and a train come through, and you had to, you know. And so she found out that going from point to point every second day or something was
not all it was cracked
not
up
that
to
much
be.
fun.
Yeah.
But it was funny. He had a hard time with the guys down in Texas accepting him because he was a Yankee.
Yeah, damn Yankee from California.
And so he took me down with him.
And you put on your best Texas accent?
No,
She didn't. She just had the word that she was a Texan.
I was.
Do you
born
know
in
what?
Texas.
This is honest to God's truth. For the first year I was on the job, I'd get off the train in Cleburne, Texas, and there's only one taxi in town, and I'd take my bag and walk over to the hotel. Never a soul to meet me. Never. So we had that convention I told you about. Well, the next convention was held in Wichita, and I told Bill, you know, we ought to have a dinner for all the attendees here on the district. Yeah, that's a great idea. Why don't you set it up? Okay. So I called Virginia and I said, you need to come out here. We're going to have a dinner. It's kind of a good thing to do. Well, I don't have a pass. I said, I'll get you one. And so I called Chicago and told them what I was trying to do. Shit, they had a pass for her right now.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Now, that was the Union or the Railroad?
Railroad. I was a
Really?
union rep, and I called and I said, hey, I've got the convention, so
Right.
I'll
Huh.
take care of it. So she got a pass. She rode out. And then, after the convention, we went down. I was that far east, visit the rest of the shops. Excuse me.
It's okay.
Walgreens. Hello. You have a prescription ready. So, anyhow, we hop on the train and go down to Cleburne. There's 3 carloads of people to meet us in Cleburne. Never been one before. But the Texan lady had come home. We had breakfast, tea, luncheon, all kinds of dinners. Every day we were there, non-stop. Poor Texan was having to suffer with this Yankee. They treated me different, absolutely different after that.
After that one.
Do you know there's a
Dinner.
new book out
That's
called The
interesting.
Help, and they just made a movie
Yep.
about it?
Yep,
Have you read the book?
I have.
It's a little bit of a downer to me. I felt sad about how those people were treated. I was down there traveling Texas during the period of that book in '63.
Yeah.
I was in Fort Worth, Texas, the first day the blacks set in at the white counters.
No kidding.
And I didn't know anything about it. I was from California. I go in the shops, the water fountains are colored in white. And they got a pipe coming up, a T comes out, and there's 2 water fountains.
Right.
And one has got a sign that says colored and the other says white. It was so ridiculous and stupid. The thing in the book about having separate toilets and all of this stuff. and yet they had them prepare their food.
And maybe more importantly, raise their babies
Absolutely.
and teach them everything about life.
And it was true.
Did you notice it the first time you went there, or was it after you heard about the protests?
First time I was in the shops. There's a whole bunch of guys crowded around, union reps here. And I said, they said something, and I said something about colored. And one of the guys said, "Hey, wait a minute. Are you talking about niggers?" And I said, "Well, I guess I am." "Well, if you don't call them niggers down here, we won't know who you're talking about." And I was just a little upset about that, but what the hell are you going to do? I'm new, I'm trying to find my way. So I go to the meeting that night. Up front's all the whites and the back is the blacks. They had black helpers. They could be a laborer or a helper. They could not be a journeyman.
But they were still in the local.
Yes.
And
Okay.
it was union practice, if not a rule, that they couldn't be a journeyman? Or did it?
Well, early on it was a union rule. They couldn't even belong to the union.
Yes,
I'll tell you
that's
about
true.
that.
Yes.
But anyway, so I go to the meeting, and I'm making my spiel, First time down there, black guy stands up in the back. I said, "Yes, brother, what?" And he said, "Everything you say, Mrs. Melvin, is just fine, but what are you going to do for us niggers?" Where are you with that? They call themselves niggers. I never did, but it's what the hell are you going to do? And I told him, I said, well, they're working on that. By then, the Fair Employment Practices Act had passed, or somewhere along in there. Anyhow, they started making journeymen out of them.
You said they're working on. Who did you mean when you said they're working on it?
The unions.
Yeah.
You see, everything in the railroads was worked at the higher angle, the higher departments, because of the Railway Labor Act passed in 1926. But let me go back to this. I don't know if I got one of the books or not. I got a bunch of union agreements.
Uh-huh.
And I don't know if I have one far enough back. But it says in the agreement, you have to be free, white, and 21. In the agreement.
Yeah.
And guess where that...
Unions have a long tradition of racist...
Guess where that phrase came from?
Where?
It's Masonic. Because I'm a Mason and I know. You have to be free, white, and 21 to be a Mason. And that word for word.
And a lot of the stuff that the union has is
Masonic.
They were all Masons.
Mm-hmm.
And so when the agreements and everything, then some of that came in.
Some of the language
Yeah.
and the rituals.
Well,
both, I
the
think.
Machinists'
right?
Union was started by Masons.
Yes.
They were all Masonic. Because in those days, if anybody found out you were talking about a union, they fired you.
Yeah.
So it had to be secret, and the Masons
Right.
were big on keeping secrets.
Stop it, Osa.
So anyway, I was kind of a quandary what the hell to do about this. What happened down south is as the blacks became more equal, when I first went down there, if a black would have a flat tire alongside the road, the white would stop and help him change it. Or change it for him. And when that went through, whites would run right by a black. They could sit out there and starve to death. They wouldn't help. They just... When I went to Cleburne, Texas, on the lawn of the courthouse was a monument to the Confederate dead of the Civil War, and it had been put in place in 1957. They were still And this Dub Dahoney I mentioned earlier, he was a park commissioner in Cleburne, and the park in Cleburne was like a scraped over piece of stuff with some grass. It wasn't much of a park. But they were very proud of their swimming pool. They had a swimming pool.
Whites only.
And I said, what are you going to do when blacks come to the swimming pool? He said, we're going to fill it full of alligators. He also told me, you ever been to a Ku Klux Klan meeting? I said, no, I don't know any Klan neighbors, the Klan people. And he said, oh yes you do, and anytime you want to go, you let me know.
Hmm.
This was in '64. And that's the way they looked at things down there, I'll tell you.
Did you feel like you had any good influence?
Did I what?
Have any influence?
No, hell no. Those people are still fighting the Civil War. You understand the state of Texas at one time was a country,
I do.
a republic. And it's true, they were a country. And they still tell you about it too.
But isn't there something about being a part of the union?
That
That
didn't make
as the
any difference.
union changes,
Well, you see,
there's something
you
that's
and
going
I-
to change?
You and I are born, and our parents raise us, and we're affected a lot by what our parents say at the table and so forth and so on. But we're most affected by the schooling we're getting.
Mm-hmm.
We get schooling 8 hours a day from the time we're about 5 or 6, whatever. And that's where we get it. Well, they taught this stuff in school about being a country. And they would remark, we can always go back to being a country, you know.
Yeah.
And
Right.
But let me tell you something. The most whipped men in the world were the Texans.
big
Their
tough
wives.
Texan, when mama speaks, daddy jumps.
I just was so flabbergasted that it wasn't funny.
Huh.
They just, we were in,
Albuquerque, New
New
Mexico.
and they had a topless bar.
Topless was just starting in those
Yeah.
days.
And so,
Yeah.
of course, I always went with Bud, you know. And if they go to the topless bar, I went to the topless bar.
Yeah, we wanted to see what was going on.
So, anyway, when I got back to
Cleburne.
Cleburne, the wives said, I know when my husband is down there, he's doing things he shouldn't. And I said, your husband's always a perfect gentleman.
That was the husband we met in the topless bar.
Yeah, they were at the topless bar. They weren't doing anything wrong.
Right.
They were just
watching.
at the bar. Yeah. And so I said, and I tried to tell these girls, well, if you want to know what your husband is doing, then why don't you go with him? Oh, well, I don't want to do that.
So we're in this topless bar. And we're just seeing what the hell's going on, you know. And the waitress comes over and said, may I help you? She's got big boobs. And Virginia does this with it.
She covers up the glass.
Well, I didn't care, but I didn't want her boob in my glass.
That's very funny.
Oh, well.
That's
So
very funny.
but I learned a lot of lessons from being in those places, you know.
In the southern,
No, in a topless,
in the topless bar. Okay, what'd you learn?
That not all breasts should be shown. There's a lot of them out there that ain't that pretty.
But anyway, but I just, like I told these gals, if you want to know what your husband's doing
Make
and
the
all of
trip.
this, then go with him.
That one gal, I can't think of her name, but she didn't have any children. She didn't have a job.
No.
It would have been just as easy for her to travel. Of course, he may have discouraged her. You know?
Oh, he probably did, but I just told her, just go, you know.
Go for it anyway.
Yeah, I didn't. That never discouraged me.
Well, that's true.
You told me about the guide dogs. You told me about the financial disaster you started,
Yeah.
you faced when you started, and about the dinners that you started that are still going on.
Yeah.
What about the actual? Were you involved in the facility and the dogs and the
I had an
actual
office there. Yes,
in
that was
Silmar?
In Silmar.
and that's one thing that I did that my predecessor didn't. I was there every day.
You drove out to Silmar?
Well, we bought a house in Valencia,
Ah,
so I drove that 10, 12 miles every day. But every day I wasn't traveling, I was at the school, and that was part of it was just that I was there. It was my presence,
right.
and so I was watching over everything, and learned a lot of things. I brought over, we didn't have a proper trainer. And I brought over a trainer from England. Well, he was over here, but he had come over from England and had been taught at their guide school, which has been going for years and was quite advanced and everything. And so one time I'm going through the bills and adding up stuff, and it was costing us about $13.75 a day to feed the students.
Each student.
$13.75 each student.
The dogs?
No, the students.
students.
Student has to come for 30 days and
Student.
stay at the facility while they're trained to use the dog.
And then the
I
staff
didn't
would
realize
eat
they
too.
So
they
that,
came to the. Okay, I didn't
yeah, we
didn't
have a
understand
dormitory
that.
there and a dining room.
So somebody who's going to get a dog from you comes and stays for 30 days and gets
Learns-
matched
Yes,
with a dog
yes.
and learns how
The
to.
dog there's a definite match program goes on, and then they work together for 30 days and before they graduate and so forth. So anyhow, it was costing me $13.75 a day to feed the students. And that seemed high to me. I'm figuring out how much a meal and so forth. Still high. And I used to go in and eat with the students, mostly breakfast, once or twice a week, just to kind of look things, see how things are going,
Be sure they were being fed correctly.
Yeah.
and so forth and so on. Well, anyhow, it comes to a time, my trainer that I brought in is cutting my throat behind my back, and students are calling and telling me about it, and so forth and so on. So I got to figure a way to ease this guy out without being brutal about it and so forth. Anyway, so along with everything else, I have I want to say accountant. What the hell was she? Financial.
Yeah,
She was an accountant.
accountant.
And I would ask, what was her name now? I can't think of it. Anyhow, she was a Jewish lady and very heavy. And I'd ask her every Monday morning, how are we doing? You know, what's the dollar count? And she'd say, we're just fine, just fine. Okay. So I took her word for it. And then things are slowing down. We got a recession going and so forth. And I start looking closer. We're $300,000 short of the year before. The fundraising is down. The
Expenses
money
are.
coming in is down.
Was that when Virginia was the?
No, the
No.
Virginia thievery was different.
Yeah, okay.
So anyhow, we're 300,000 short. So I took that opportunity to lay off the head trainer because he was drawing the most money and I could save the most with one dismissal, keep everybody else on. And I wanted to get rid of him because he was cutting my throat.
What was he doing?
Oh, he was bad-mouthing me when I was gone and bad-mouthing the way the school was being operated and all this other stuff. He was running his own show. He would have parties where he would invite only certain people from the school, which I object to. If you're going to have a party, everybody goes or nobody goes.
Yeah.
And just a lot of things, and insubordination on occasion. So I took the opportunity and I dismissed him. And all hell broke loose. His wife was a fire eater, and a lot of her friends, and they wrote to all the board of directors. And Roger Penske of the Penske Corporation was one of our board members then.
That
Huh?
Bud brought on,
Huh?
that you brought
Yeah.
on.
Anyhow, as an end result of all the stink, Roger Penske called Bill Wimpenzinger and said, what's the story? And Wimpenzinger says, I got an investigation started, and he sent out the retired president of the firefighters union to investigate. And it was a whitewash job, you know. Wimpy picked him, and Wimpy sent him, and probably wrote the report, I don't know. But anyhow, I got a clean bill of health. Because I'd covered my tracks. What I did was I went back and reviewed his personnel file and times I'd had him in and talked to him. And it was all noted there, so it was an ongoing
Yeah.
problem,
Yeah.
blah, 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 blah. Well, that's another side. So then,
But you still have money problems that
Yeah.
you use that as an
Well,
excuse, but there's another issue here.
our money problems were fast being healed. That 300,000 wasn't horrible like it was before. I had to go and borrow, I think it was 200,000 from the union when I first went in, just to keep going.
Right.
And we sold a piece of property that we had in North Hollywood, and I paid the 200,000 back. But anyhow, on more than one occasion, I had to go to the union and borrow money to keep it afloat. But our fundraising was doing better, etc., etc.
You were saying, though, that it was costing you $13.
Oh yeah, well, a story there. So anyhow, as soon as what was his name anyhow, as soon as I got rid of
Pain in the ass was his name.
the pain in the ass,
Trainer from
Trainer.
England, yeah.
the cost of my food in the kitchen dropped from $13.75 a person per day to about $6 something. So I started asking around. He was feeding his whole family every night up at the dining room with the students. And of course, he had control of the kitchen. I didn't do that. So he was telling
You just
the cook,
told them to split it up.
they told the
so
cook
that
to
it
cook
looked-
extra.
Huh.
And also I found out that he was taking food home. He was stealing from the goddamn school.
Hey.
So anyway, that cured my food problem, you know.
Being a manager is not an easy thing. Did you want your children to go into the union?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I think union's a good thing.
Our daughter's in a union. Our youngest son is a union. In fact, he's
Shop chairman or
yes, he's the chairman or
Griever.
something. But our oldest son,
they
had
had
a
a union
union.
and they decertified.
They decertified. So
What happened?
I
I
don't
don't
know.
know. It was the
Teamsters.
Teamsters union.
I
and they
think,
didn't
you
like
know,
it.
to me anyhow, my experience with the machinists union, the only time there's a successful decertification is a union representative wasn't doing his job. They had a decertification down in San Diego.
Yeah.
The lodge hall was across the freeway from the plant down there. That was Consolidated or Douglas or somebody. Well, anyhow, they had a decertification over there. Their union rep never come by to see him. And he was across the goddamn, he wasn't 300 yards from them. And they just didn't get up off their ass and go over there and go through the shop and talk to people.
Huh.
See, Bud visited at the shops every so many,
The large shops
Shops.
once a month.
yes.
The medium-sized shops once every other month. And the very small shops, like 6 Guys in Cut Shoot, Texas, out there. I forgot the name of that
Yeah,
little
little
place.
town.
But they actually had a water fountain with alligators in the water. And those guys, once a year, we'd go by and say howdy, anything you need, got problems, whatever.
Right.
And don't forget, we're just a phone call away. And, you know, do the whole thing. Never had an election. When I took over from that job, never had an election. I figured part of it was after the 5-1 win, people were afraid to
Right.
try that on. They didn't know what the hell I did, but they wasn't willing to buck it. So I never had an election. So
It's impressive.
until they merged the Union Pacific, the Southern Pacific, and the Santa Fe, then we did have an election. Of course, I won my section. I was a general chairman.
But Bud never, I mean, if they called, a guy called and needed a representative, he was there. And sometimes it was the SP guy, he would never go, and so Bud would go, even though it wasn't
His
particular
person.
area.
Yeah, I got called on the railroad system in 1926 with the Railway Labor Act. You could not fire a man on a railroad without a hearing because it was being abused so badly by the railroad. So, when it come to a hearing, some people are better than others, and I was really better. So they would call me, our directing General Chairman, Bill Irwin, hey, can you go up and help Albury? They got an investigation up there, and it involves diesel locomotives, Bud, and I don't know anything about diesels, and Albury don't know anything about anything. So I truck off to Salt Lake City to represent a guy. Not my territory, nothing, but I do.
But you're doing it.
I do, and that was an interesting case too. They had a locomotive and a can't say it now, caboose. A locomotive and a caboose was going up outside of Salt Lake, Utah. They got a big ammunition depot. So the locomotive and the caboose is followed by another locomotive and caboose protection. I'm going to sneeze here in a minute.
Okay.
So
Bless you.
the thing is, they're going up to pick up poison gas from World War I. It's leaking in the containers. So they're going to take it out and do a burn somewhere, but they're going to take it away from the depot. The way they do that is the first locomotive, they go up, and then they hook up to the cars and everything. The second locomotive now is the lead locomotive. And it's going across the tracks in front of this highly toxic waste to make sure there's no breaks in the track, no derails, no nothing, that everything's clear in front, and then the others can come behind it.
Okay.
They get up to the depot, and they have to go in some gates, and then there's a building there, and they go in and are fitted with gas masks. a habit of engineers. They have in a locomotive, they got a real sophisticated system now, but in those days, in a locomotive they had a dead man pedal. And you had to keep your foot on that pedal, because if you died and your foot came off the pedal, it'd apply the brakes on the train. Well, some of the old engineers are tired, they don't want to do it or whatever, and they take a toolbox and set on the pedal. And that's what this engineer did. So they get up there, they get out the locomotives, they're all shut off, the engine are left running. They always do. They go in to get fitted with a mask, the box slips off the pedal and the locomotive starts to run away. So they see it, they run out, they jump in the other locomotive, they run after it, and they try to couple up to grab the other locomotive.
Right.
And the couplers are like this, and then when they're open, they're like this, and they come together, and the couplers shut like this.
Right.
Well, the one coupler was closed, they couldn't get it to lock up, and they chased that thing forever. One guy was thinking about trying to jump over, but shit, if you fall, you're ground up in the hamburger. So he didn't. The locomotive ran away. And it meets a train coming the other way. Just going like hell. The control tower controller way over in Salt Lake City is trying to derail this locomotive. And they turn the switch and switch it off, and hopefully it's sharp enough that it'll lay over. But they said it'd raise up, there'd be 3 foot under the wheel and it'd fall back down. So it hit this other train full on, and it destroyed 5 locomotives. Because after they hit and was bent all to hell, huge steel beam frames bent upright. They had a guy there from the wrecking crew, and the foreman says, cut here, and he's cutting there, and he said, no, there's a diesel leaking here. Cut over here, so he's cutting over there, sets it afire. And those 5 locomotives burn up.
Hey.
With
How many
3,000
people?
gallons of diesel.
Ay.
No people on the train, but the first 2 cars had, one had,
How could there be no people?
well, it's a freight train.
It's a freight train.
But
No.
there's a.
Well, they were talking and told them, shut the train down and get the hell out of there.
Oh, I
so
see.
They
They
stopped
had
the
enough
train,
warning to get
ran
off.
like hell.
Got it. Okay, good.
So anyhow, and the 2 cars, one held pigs and one held sheep, and they all got out and was running across the freeway, and it was a terrible mess, I guess. And the fire department, you know, was 100 miles away or whatever. Thing burned up. So anyhow, they had a hearing, and I had to go represent them. So I go there and I go in and I announce myself and tell them I'm representing, and then we go through a big brouhaha about I'm not from the Union Pacific Railroad. I said, I'm a union representative from District 19, and I've been assigned to do this. I am representing so-and-so. Well, they had to make a bunch of calls, and finally that was all right. So I go into the hearing. Now there's people from the FBI there. There's people from the Department of Transportation there. There's people from the Department of Defense there. We got a big room full of people. And the engineer gets up there and says, I take full responsibility. I put a tool chest on a dead man's pedal. I left the thing and so forth and so on and so on. Took full responsibility. Comes time for the
impressive.
machinist. He conducted the inspection. And the big brouhaha was that there was a valve left open that should have been shut. or something or other, it would have automatically shut itself down. And my guy said, I shut it. And I asked everybody that had connection with him, did you see the valve? No, I didn't look at the valve. I said, I'm trying to say that the valve was changed either in the wreck or with the wreck crew. Didn't make any difference. I proved reasonable doubt for sure, but they gave him like 30 days suspension, which wasn't anything, and he was a young guy and so forth and so on. So we kept him from being fired, but it wasn't my district. I was just sent over to do it. So we did.
Half the time people would say that Bud was a lawyer, and they put him in instead because he was a lawyer. He wasn't, but they.
No, I had backhanded compliments. We had a train came out of L.A. on Amtrak, and everybody on the dome car got sick because the dome car was rocking like a boat, and a wheel was out of round, and it had been on a truing machine and trued out of round in L.A. There's no damn defense for that, really. The only thing you can claim is there was something, dirt or something got in there to make the center make it all around on the wheel. But it's up to the operator of the lathe to make sure that's all clean and goes together right.
Yeah.
I went to Cleburne and borrowed a manual for the machine, the truing machine, from a friend of mine I used to work with. And I was tooling up for this, and nothing happened. And nothing happened. And nothing happened. Finally, I got a hold of the local chairman. I guess I went in. I said, what the hell happened to the investigation? He said, oh, they called that off. They said they didn't have anybody tough enough to go against you. And they tried me.
I was going to ask you if your approach to the job was a lawyer's approach, which is you defend people no matter how guilty they are.
Oh, yeah. There's a couple reasons
and you've
for
just
that.
Presented, you just answered my question before I asked it.
I had, they had one guy that I defended, and it cost them, I think it was $80,000 in back pay. That was before the truing thing, and that's when they decided they didn't want to fight it, And this guy was wrong, and I got him $80,000,
And you were happy about that?
It's very difficult when you're defending somebody you know is wrong. However, the railroads had a habit of taking these guys that you say, look, you don't have any case here. And the railroad liked to play harass too.
Yeah.
And so they would pay for an attorney for the guy to sue the union for failure to properly represent. So consequently, we represented everybody.
That's the reason you did it?
Huh?
That's the reason?
Yeah, that's my reasoning. I didn't want to get sued, and so I represented everybody.
Huh.
And sometimes I won when I really hated the guy. I didn't like him at all.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
But I'll tell you something else now. This is almost off the record. I enjoyed hearings, and I maybe should have been a trial lawyer because I really liked it. I'd go in there with a dry mouth. My God, I was just a wreck. And boy, once I got engaged, I was like a snake. I snapped at everything that moved. I knocked the hell out of everybody. I had a case in San Bernardino. there was 5 guys. They had an engine failed on load test. This engine had just been rebuilt, brand new engine. And it burned up a bearing. When you start a new engine, a fresh built engine, you run it for 1 minute. You go in, you feel all the bearings to see if they're heating or not. Then you run it for 5 minutes again, 15 minutes again, and you work up to an hour, and you run it an hour, and you hand check all these bearings to see that they're not heating. So this engine failed, burn out a bearing. And a bearing can burn out if a piece of rubbish goes through or something, you know. So they called a hearing. They're not gonna fire these guys. That was my own fault too. They got to where if they were offering them 30 demerits, in the railroad system they called them brownies, and if you got 60 brownies you were fired. But they'd give them out at 20, 10, 30 at a time, 40 at a time, whatever. And I think this was a brownie deal, but you don't know because you're going in there. They don't say this is for this much. And they hadn't offered these guys anything. And these guys were second shift guys. The hearing officer was a guy named Barry, who I liked. We got along very well. And the main witness was, I can't say his name. I had worked with him as an apprentice, and he was now general foreman. No, assistant superintendent. Assistant superintendent, Bill something or other. Anyhow, so we get in there, and I'm a great trapper. So I said, now for the hearing, how long does it take a bearing to fail? I said, this is going to be reviewed by people that don't know anything about mechanics. He said, about a minute. His first mistake. Could it take 5 minutes? No, can't go that long. It'd have to be a minute. And I'd ask him a bunch of questions, and I'd come back to, are you sure that it's only a minute?
Right.
Well, you know, in the game you're playing, he decides I want him to say it can take longer than a minute. And he ain't going to give it to me. He's going to, you know. So we dance around this for the goddamnedest longest time. And oh, Bill, shit. Anyhow, he's not giving me nothing. It's a minute only, not over a minute. Oh, minute. For the record, and for everybody in this room, will you explain why this locomotive went through bearing runs, and it ran 8 hours that night for horsepower runs, and they couldn't get horsepower, and it didn't fail until the next morning? And the hearing officer said, what? Wait a minute. Stop the recorder. Will everybody excuse us for a little bit? So we went outside, come back in, and he takes up the hearing again. I said, what the hell are you doing here, Ron? He said, I'm closing out this hearing. Okay. And that was the end of it. They couldn't explain it.
Right.
I don't know when it failed, but not getting horsepower was probably failing there.
Would you like a piece
That's
of
so funny.
Cake?
Banana split
You know,
cake?
I'm
Banana split.
still quite full.
Oh, okay.
But thank you. Thank you.
Well,
Also, I need to get a move on.
I'll take a cup of tea. So anyway,
Would you like a cup of tea?
You know, I'm good. I'm happy. I'm full.
Good.
And I'm a
so
water drinker.
anyway, that's those things got me in trouble in the long run because they'd lay in wait for me, but it also saved a lot of hearings because,
They'd give up before they started.
well, the guys in Chicago, who I knew well because of working with them and everything, and I learned their pattern. If there was any chance of me winning, they'd settle. They would not let it go to a
Yeah.
referee. So in that respect, but the settlements sometimes they were terrible. They did awful things to people. And I had one guy, they had screwed him over absolutely, terribly. And it was about Thanksgiving. They come back and they said, we'll put him back without back pay. It's my duty to call the guy. And I said, that's what they're offering. Well, what do you think? I said, you know what? I can't predict what a referee will rule. So all I can do is tell you the offer, and I'll fight like hell for you if you want to go on with it. And he said, no, my kid's got to have Christmas gifts. I'll go take it. So they saved themselves 6 months of wages that this guy should have got. So
That's terrible.
that's the way of it. But I used to look forward to hearings. I was really combative when that come to that. Jesus.
So you have any advice for the current labor movement?
I wished I did.
I wished you did.
It's very difficult to organize when they're sending your jobs overseas, The union movement the movement itself is dying, and it needs to get healthy and going.
Everybody's afraid.
That's certainly part of it.
Well,
Yeah.
the one that broke the back of the union movement
Was
was Ronald Reagan.
Reagan.
Patco.
When he got the air traffic controllers.
Yep.
And I had seen the letter. It was a reproduction, of course, but I seen the letter where he wrote to them and told them they had no reason to fear the President of the United States. He was with them 100%. And then he did that. And then I'd had hundreds of people say, hey, there's no use joining the union. The president will just throw it out. And that's what made the turn there.
Yeah.
But
And these people just think Reagan was the,
they still think he's wonderful.
yeah.
And he's the guy that deregulated everything. You know
we
what?
are
I used to
still
get
suffering the consequences.
Yes.
Oh yeah, used to get on a plane or go to get on a plane. Maybe I missed the plane. I got caught in traffic and I was 5 minutes late. The plane's gone. I could take that ticket to any other airline and they would honor it for a flight from Chicago to Ontario.
Yeah.
Any airline that was going would accept that ticket. Then they deregulated. Everybody's got a different price. They won't honor the other guy's ticket. They don't feed you anymore because the other guy's not feeding you anymore. And all these damn things. Now they're charging you for luggage. Well, that's my other pet peeve. Do you know where 90% of the fault lays with all of that? The oil industry. They raise the price of fuel so damn much. The airlines got to raise their airline tickets, and they're struggling to try to keep it down, and so they cut out everything else. And it's tough enough to travel for a living without having all this other garbage.
Yeah,
you
it's
know.
really difficult.
Yeah.
So I used to pick airlines by how they fed.
Back in the day.
Yeah,
I'm
no-
going to turn this off. I thank you so much.
Wait a minute, I'm just getting started. What the hell's going on here?
We're going to take a break anyway.
He'll talk all night.
Oh yeah, then I won't make it to my next.
Well,
This has been great. I need to take your photo.
terrific.
If you don't mind, I want to take you, and then I want to take the both of you.
Yeah, that's terrific. I photographed so well.
Yeah. I hate my picture taken.
Oh yeah.
You do? What's a good spot?
Hmm?
You want to just you want to stand somewhere, or you want to sit right there?
I'm sitting here.
You're sitting there. I'm going to do my best.
Well, I mean, is the light wrong or
I don't know. Let me. You're not supposed to take it
not?
into the window, but maybe
Well,
if I just.
we can.
No, that's okay. I think I'll just stand over here. There. That's good.
You about ready?
Wait, you look like you're mad at me.
He'll stick his tongue out or something.
No. Here we go. If I'm elected, ladies and gentlemen.
Okay, excellent. And then let me get another one. Sorry, I gotta figure out how to. There we go. I'm just gonna circle around you. Okay. Oops, wait, it's red for some reason.
Why don't I just send you 8x10 glossy and let it go?
Send me your headshot. Absolutely. The one you did for the modeling agency.
Yeah.
Oh.
How am I going to get you all together?
Why do you want me?
Because you ran your mouth on the
Well, if you don't
recorder.
mind, we could just
She's
go
got to
right-
have a record.
Do you mind? Do you mind?
No.
Can I push you?
No.
You can scoot right
Come
over.
around
Wait a
this way, Jim.
Okay.
Oh, dear.
Bring this chair.
I'm sorry.
That's all right.
What?
Bring this chair.
Yeah. No, not you.
No, you guys don't need to be in the
No.
Or they can, I guess, if
weren't-
they want.
You weren't a union rep. You didn't
Yes.
even get here before I retired.
Hey, guys.
You're big babies.
Okay, say, how many years is it?
Oh,
61.
61.
61 was amazing. I'm so impressed. Okay.
It's a product of fear.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
61. Yeah.
61 is so impressive, I just have to say. So,
Well, there was some pretty close ones there where it might have not been 61.
Yeah.
A couple overseas in Korea. Might have been only one or two. Then I got sick. Got out of that. I found out from Holly the other day, Matt thought I was dying
Oh, did he?
when I come home from heart surgery and I had no voice, remember?
Oh.
Jesus. Anyhow.
thank you so much.
Yeah,
And
well,
he.
have you
would,
got everything you want? We'll
I am
meet with you again.
I am sure I have everything. I can
Go
just say
home,
that you
make
have a
notes.
lot of stories, and
Let's
we're
see, you're out
gonna
of New
have
York,
to-
right? No.
Yeah,
New York?
I'm in New York. I'm at NYU, so I am in New York.
Okay.
But well,
You
I was
make
going to
all
meet
your
you.
notes. We'll be to Placid Harbor again someday, and that's an easy run
That
for
is
you.
easy. Anytime you come to Placid Harbor,
Well, okay.
you let me know. I'm
Here we
serious
go.
about that.
Here we go.
Because we can't. Charlie is a busy guy, and he may or may not remember to tell me.
Maria,
Right?
do you have a business card?
I don't. But
Jesus,
I can,
what kind of business lady are you without a card?
I'm a historian.
Oh, jeez. Well,
So
make
I'm going to write
notes.
it right here.
Make notes for me, historian.
Okay.
Maria is trying to get together a group,
The Rat Pack.
the Rat
Yes.
Pack,
Yes.
to that would probably be very good for you too, historian because all the Rat Pack is us old guys. But she's trying to get together a group for August 25 through 29.
Really?
I talked to her the other day and she said, well, it depends on what kind of response we get. If we don't get enough, we'll cancel it out and do it another time. The time before she tried to do it was in connection with a program she had going there,
Right.
and only 2 responded. It was me and some other guy. But it was February, it was cold, nobody wanted to go up there, you know. They're talking to you about this at Christmas time.
Right.
So they're trying for August now, and if she gets the group, then she said it'll be 10 to 12, and August 25 through 29. There is a thing here, you might know, that isn't going to work either, because
This is the form that donates this interview to the
I'm donating,
Machinist's Archive at the Southern Labor Archive.
and
And it was written by a lawyer.
and what value is my interview?
Enormous historical value.
No dollar value? I
Not-
can't take it off my taxes? Jesus.
I tell you what I tell people is if we figure out a way to write a book, make a movie, make a website that makes a lot of money, you'll get your share.
We'll hear from you. Oh, yeah.
Our son is going to go with him. The kids have decided that we can't travel alone anymore.
Advanced years.
So I think our son will go if they have this one in
No,
August.
he's not going.
Oh,
He's
really?
not going?
No, he can't get changed.
Oh, he can't get changed.
So
Okay.
Holly will go.
So Holly will go.
Yeah. But that's if and when and all of that. You want me to call you if they decide it's a go?
That would be great.
For
I'm not
August.
sure what I'm doing in August, honestly.
But make your notes and we'll